to get enrolled today, and I was the third black person in there. And about 10 more white boys came in. I was the last one that got waited on.
Same thing.
I don't appreciate that.
Then how can you get 7 demerits in one class in one day? For nothing. See? Yeah, I got a prejudiced white teacher.
And that other
This
thing
school just not right.
Another thing about the white teachers sitting us in the back, and you ask them why they go sit us in the back, and they say, don't ask me no questions, just sit in the back. Those days are over.
In which they doing us wrong, you know, making us sit at the back of the class and putting 2 colors to, you know, a class full of whites.
We did have one separate incident. It was not a riot as such. One student was slapped because she said a girl called her a nigger. And this was the extent of the so-called riot. And they are not being expelled for no reason whatsoever. These students left on their own. Nobody attempted to stop them, but we said if they left, they would not be permitted back into the building. Those students out there elected to leave, and we let them go, so long as they do not try to come back in.
They're calling you an Uncle Tom. Why is this?
I get the impression that they expect me to take their word because I'm black and they're black, and anything they tell me, I'm supposed to believe it. But I say we have rules and regulations for the students of Thomas Jefferson, irregardless as to color. And this is where we look at it.
At this point, they have tried to deal with it in a group process. They've been outside the school, they've been in the auditorium, and we did talk calmly, we did talk and get at some of the problems and difficulties. But they're asking for solutions now to a human relationship that takes a long time. And they need to work it out in the classroom also.
After meeting for almost 2 hours, the black students decided to go home, meet among themselves with the help of the Tri-Ethnic Committee, try to decide what to do. Dr. Estes, are you getting a little discouraged?
Not at all. We, in fact, are encouraged. As long as we can keep people communicating, we think we're making progress.
For Channel 8 News on the Move, this is Judy Hanna at Thomas Jefferson High School.
very pleased with the overall attitude of the players. I think they want to do a good job this year. They're really coming out. We haven't had many guys miss any of our informal practices at all, and now that we've started our two-a-days, of course, everybody's here. Our shooting has been very good. This is one thing that I knew that the Chaparrals had done well in the past, is shoot. They've continued this, and right now I'd say our biggest things, we've got to improve our defense and our rebounding.
I know that you must be pleased offensively, at least, with your backcourt duo of Freeman and Jones. You had said when you first came in that you might still be looking for the big man in the center. Are you still?
Well, yes, we'd still prefer to have a 7-foot one player like Milwaukee has, but now that we've picked up Rich Neiman from the Floridians, I feel pretty good about the center position. Gene Moore is going to do a good job for us, but it was very important to me that we get a big center to back up Gene. I don't think we could go with another 6'8" or 6'9" backup center. We have to have that big player that can go in and play an Artis Gilmore or a Lou Alcindor, somebody of this nature, at least for 10 to 12 minutes a game.
Go home, or if you did go back into class after they had sex.
The Republic National Bank and the First National Bank, both in downtown Dallas, are the primary targets of WHEAL, a Women's Equity Action League, which charges that those two banks and 38 others in Dallas County are discriminating against women in hiring, training, and in salaries. The women are determined to bring the banks in line with federal law. They say they're asking the Treasury Department to investigate and to withdraw up to $160 million in public funds in the two banks. WHEAL President Mrs. Marcia King amplified on their complaints and the action today on News 8 at noon. The Women's Equity Action League says it's scheduled a meeting for Monday with officials of the Republic Bank, at which time they'll talk over the situation. Besides pregnancy leaves, the women claim it involves restricting women from training and advancement in banks and equal salaries. If they're successful with the Republic and the First National Banks, the women intend to expand into Dallas County and then to carry on a nationwide campaign to force equal employment in banks. They say if necessary, they'll boycott the institutions and perhaps take the matter into courts. WHEAL says it wants to finish with the banks first, but when that's done, the women may take on savings and loan associations and insurance companies. Phil Reynolds, Channel 8 News on the Move at the Republic National Bank in downtown Dallas.
they may call it dialogue, but it's really not dialogue because nobody's listening to anyone else, and more importantly, nobody's hearing anyone else, and at the final level, really nobody's communicating with anyone else. Maybe the most effective thing they could do for these kinds of so-called dialogues is to set up some ground rules where nobody can initiate until he's responded to the last person's suggestion.
Our position at this point, Don, is that we don't want to get tied up in making a ruling on a technicality on Robert's Rules one way or the other. We want the people on the Dallas Community Action Board to get together, to have board meetings, and to work for the function of providing resources for the poor. That's our position at this point.
Well, it's my senior year, and I played here now for several years, and all leading up to your senior year, so you hope it is.
Speaking for the defense, how do you think you'll do this year?
Well, we've got most of our people back. Our secondary's intact, and all of our linebackers are back except for one, and most of our people down front have played considerably, so we feel like as a defense we should have a good year.
You'll start off with a big test against Oklahoma.
Yes, sir, we will, and of course they've got 38 or 44 of their top players coming back, and they're going to have a fine team, and we're expecting a real good ball game and a real hard test.
What did you
We're mindful of the fact that black people did all of the building until the organization of the American Federation of Labor, and that they laid down the number one qualification, that you must be white. That's a qualification black people cannot meet today any more so than they met when it was first organized. The representatives of the American Federation of Labor who have participated in these negotiations for the past year are the only ones who are not amenable to an agreement whereby the black people and the Mexican people can be included in the construction industry of this city.
Not everyone who spoke felt that hostily about it, but everyone here expressed their displeasure that after having met for more than a year and repeatedly tried to come up with a plan everyone could agree to, no one from the labor unions was here tonight when the contract was signed. A spokesman for the Labor Department is here. I asked him whether labor unions were always the problem. He said no, at earlier stages in the game, usually minority groups did not believe in the sincerity of efforts such as this, but that labor unions, he said, are usually, ultimately, the stumbling block. Jerry Taft, Channel 8 News on the Move, Fort Worth.
There's a showdown brewing between labor unions in Fort Worth and the United States Labor Department. And from here, it appears the feds have all the marbles. The Labor Department has issued memos to 70 major American cities telling them to get their labor unions, construction companies, and minority groups together to provide job training and jobs for minority people in the construction industry. A figure of 23% has been adopted as fairly representing the number of minority people in Fort Worth. So, in order to meet the Labor Department requirements, the goal of the effort here must be ultimately to have 23% of the people working in construction either black or brown. For over a year, union people, construction company people, and minority people have been meeting almost every Wednesday night trying to arrive at a plan acceptable to all three groups. So far, they have been unsuccessful. I said the labor unions would be involved in a showdown with the Labor Department. On 2 occasions during the past year, the minority and construction people have agreed on a proposed agreement. Labor has not been able to agree with either plan. The Labor Department has granted 2 time extensions to the coalition, saying they'd rather have a plan local people had developed and could live with. The alternative is for the Labor Department to impose a plan on Fort Worth. Now time is running out. The coalition meets tonight with a completed plan. The minorities will sign it, the construction people will sign it, but so far only one of the 21 labor groups involved has indicated it would sign. At least 7 or 8 labor signatures would be needed for the plan to be acceptable to the Labor Department. However, if the pact is not signed tonight by a significant representation of each group, it is unclear exactly what will happen, because the Labor Department has several similar situations around the country, and they say that legally and logistically there's just not much they could do immediately if no pact is signed. Jerry Taft, Channel 8 News, reporting.
That's very true. We've discussed every idea, every angle that anyone can come up with in about the last 2 weeks around this office. We have discussed denial to refund. We've discussed termination of the agency. We've discussed the other ways the board may be formed. We've discussed the fact that under the Green Amendment to the EOA Act, the city and council have the right to opt out of the program and designate a different group as a community action agency in Dallas. These are just things that we've discussed. We've reached no conclusion.
And there is no imminent danger of cutting off of funds?
No, sir, not at this point.
I always place the responsibility at the top. The person who's paid to discharge the responsibilities is always ultimately responsible. And I think you have to place this right at the top with the governor who ordered out the National Guard. Prisoners who were with their backs to the wall, so to speak, had to be in a negotiable position. They had to negotiate. They really didn't have any options.
There were attempts by prison officials and state officials to negotiate. Are you of the opinion that the officials themselves were not capable men as far as negotiating is concerned?
I believe that mature men of goodwill and with skills in their areas could have negotiated effectively with these inmates. There are available to us today many different models for human resource development programs. Some of these have already been implemented in a number of prisons. For example, the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary has been transformed from essentially a an anarchy where the inmates were in charge of the prison to what is now considered to be the national model for adult corrections. And this was done simply by training 12 line officers to get involved in and discharge responsibilities in correctional counseling, to work with the men, to work to effect their adjustments, to develop programs, to meet some basic human needs and conditions.
Could your statements be described as a coddling of the prisoners?
I don't think so. I would rather suggest that if we're going to set standards for inmates, we ought to set standards for our professional staffs that we're paying to conduct these institutions.
Giving up.
No, I can't.
You don't have any opinion at this
No,
point?
not at all. Not other than what she's already said.
What is that?
She said her opinion was made up. She said she might change it, but I don't know what her opinion is.
You don't think whether it's in your favor or not?
No, I couldn't pass on that.
Whether the judge's decision is already made or not, it will not be delivered until tomorrow. That decision, when it comes, will be in this civil trial and will amount to an order by the court that whatever defendants lose this case not break the law anymore. However, beyond that, the judge will issue findings of fact regarding each defendant, and any findings of fact that would be applicable could then be used to secure possible criminal charges from grand juries in the future. This is Roger McDonald, Channel 8 News on the Move at the Dallas Federal Building.